A ghost in the silver mist in the Ghost River Valley, deep in northern Alaska, silence has weight. It settles on your shoulders like a heavy load, presses against your eardrums, and forces you to hear your own heartbeat like the strikes of a hammer. This is a place where maps lie, compasses go mad due to magnetite deposits, and people vanish without a trace, becoming part of the folklore. Caleb Rain didn't vanish. He dissolved. A former tracker for the Search and Rescue Service, he left the world of men 5 years ago after an operation that cost his partner's life. Now, he was the warden of Sector 4, a vast territory of the reserve where tourists rarely ventured and poachers were too afraid to tread. Caleb sat on the porch of his cabin, built from rough cedar logs. He was sharpening a knife, the monotonous, soothing sound of metal against stone. Next to him, balancing on the railing with the grace of a tightrope walker, lay Silver. Silver was not a house cat. He was a Canadian lynx of gigantic proportions. His fur held a rare, almost silvery hue, making him look like a ghost in the twilight. His paws were wide, like snowshoes, and the black tufts on his ears were currently catching every rustle of the forest, the fall of a pinnacone 100 yards away, the squeak of a vole under the snow, the breath of the wind in the spruce tops. Their history was not a rescue story in the classic sense. Caleb didn't pull Silver from a trap, and Silver didn't warm Caleb in a blizzard. Their alliance was born of a duel. 3 years ago, a young, inexperienced lynx tried to steal Caleb's prey, a shot hare. Caleb could have shot the intruder. The lynx could have shredded Caleb's face. Instead, they stood facing each other in deep snow for half an hour, exchanging growls and stares. Caleb retreated first, leaving half the hair. It was an act of respect that the beast remembered. Since that day, they shared territory, then food, and eventually solitude. Silver suddenly raised his head. His yellow eyes narrowed, ears swiveling south. He made a low, guttural sound that Caleb had learned to recognize flawlessly. It wasn't a warning about a bear or a wolf. It was a warning about something alien. "I hear it too, brother," Caleb said quietly, sheathing his knife. Far in the sky, breaking the sacred silence of the valley, grew the rhythmic roar of rotors. The golden cage, the helicopter, was expensive. A private Sikorsky, painted matte black, landed in the clearing before the cabin, kicking up a vortex of snow dust. Silver didn't run, but he vanished, simply dissolving into the shadows under the overhang, becoming invisible to prying eyes. 4 men emerged from the chopper. 3 were clearly security, professionals, movements economical, weapons concealed but ready for combat. The 4th was different. Tall, dressed in expensive but practical winter gear, with a face accustomed to giving orders. "Mr. Rain?" The man spoke loudly, shouting over the dying noise of the rotors. "My name is Victor Wagner. I own Aureus Mining." Caleb didn't stand up. He remained seated, holding his cup of coffee. "You are in a protected zone, Mr. Wagner. Private flights are prohibited below 1,000 feet. You just scared every game animal within a 5-mile radius." Wagner smiled, but his eyes remained cold, like ice on the river. "I'll pay the fine. I can buy this entire reserve if I want to, but I don't need land." "I need you. I don't hire out," Caleb cut him off. "Guides are in town, 100 miles south. Guides in town know tourist trails. I need someone who knows the Dead Loop." Caleb tensed. The Dead Loop was a section of the mountains where magnetic anomalies peaked, and the terrain was so treacherous that even wolves dared not venture there. "There is nothing there, only rocks and death. My son is there." Wagner's voice changed. The arrogance vanished, replaced by a note resembling desperation. His plane, a light Cessna, disappeared from radar 2 days ago. Rescue teams refuse to fly due to weather and magnetic storms. They say there is no chance, but the beacon. A weak signal came from right there. I am paying $100,000. Now, and the same amount again when we find him. Dead or alive. Caleb looked at the guards. They were too well armed for a search mission. Automatic rifles, tactical vests. Why do you need an army to find a son? There are bears in those mountains, Mr. Rain, and they say smugglers. I don't gamble with my safety. Caleb hesitated. $100,000 would let him fix the cabin, buy new gear, maybe even help his dead partner's family. But his intuition screamed that something was wrong. He glanced into the darkness under the overhang. 2 yellow lights blinked in response. Silver was calm, but alert. I'll go alone, Caleb said. Your men stay here. They won't make it where I'm going. No, Wagner replied harshly. I'm coming with you. And my head of security, Barnes. Just the 3 of us. Caleb sighed. He realized this man wouldn't back down. Fine. Departure in an hour. Dress warm, Wagner. Mountains don't take bribes. Path into the abyss. They had been walking for 6 hours. The snow grew deeper, the air thinner. The dead loop lived up to its name. Rocks hung over the trail like dragon's teeth, and the wind howled in the crevices, creating the illusion of human screams. Caleb walked point, breaking the trail. Wagner and Barnes followed. Barnes, a burly man with a scar on his neck, carried a massive backpack and constantly scanned the area with a thermal scope. Your gadget doesn't work here, Caleb threw over his shoulder. Magnetite interference. You'll be seeing ghosts. Barnes just spat. Just do your job, Ranger. Caleb knew they weren't alone. Silver was moving on a parallel course. He didn't tread on the human path. He moved along the rocks above, leaping over chasms, silent as a cloud's shadow. Caleb occasionally spotted his silhouette against the gray sky, a sentinel guarding his home. At a rest stop, Wagner took out a satellite phone, trying to catch a signal. Why do you live here, Rain? He asked, stowing the phone. A man with your skills could lead security at my company. I don't like people breathing down my neck, Caleb replied, slicing jerky. And I don't like people who think they can buy everything. Everything is for sale, Wagner smiled. It's just a question of currency. Time, money, loyalty, life. At that moment, stones scattered from the cliff. Barnes instantly raised his rifle, aiming at the ledge. Movement. Lower the weapon, Caleb barked. On the ledge, 50 yards away, appeared Silver. He sat, wrapping his tail around his paws, looking down at the humans with imperial calm. What the hell is that? Wagner whispered. Is that a lynx? It's huge. That's Silver. He lives here. No sudden movements. Barnes didn't lower the weapon. His finger whitened on the trigger. It's a predator. I have orders to eliminate any threat. If you shoot, Caleb said quietly, but with terrifying weight, you won't make it down. I promise you that. Wagner placed a hand on the barrel of Barnes's rifle and lowered it. Save the ammo, Barnes. Nice kitty. Maybe we'll make a rug out of him on the way back. Caleb swallowed his rage. He realized these men weren't rescuers. They were killers. The story about the son was a lie. But what were they really looking for? Truth beneath the snow. They found the plane on the 2nd day. It hadn't crashed completely, but had made a hard landing on a frozen lake in the center of a basin. This was no civilian Cessna. It was a military transport scout drone, devoid of markings, retrofitted for a pilot. There it is, Wagner exhaled. Greed flashed in his eyes. Where's the passenger seat? Caleb asked, stopping. That's a cargo bird. There's no room for your son. Wagner drew a pistol. Barnes aimed his rifle at Caleb. You did your job, Rain. Thank you. What's in there? Caleb asked, not raising his hands. He saw a gray shadow flick across the cliff above the lake. Silver was in position. Something that changes the balance of world power, Wagner answered. A bioweapon prototype stolen from competitors. My son is a container worth billions. And you are just a witness who shouldn't exist. Barnes, finish him, Wagner tossed out, moving toward the plane. Barnes smiled, aiming at Caleb's chest. Nothing personal, Ranger. Just BUSI ... double quotes. He didn't finish. From the cliff, from a height of 15 feet, a silver lightning bolt fell upon him. Silver didn't growl. He acted in total silence. His weight knocked Barnes off his feet, claws shredding the tactical vest at the shoulder. The shot went wild into the sky. Caleb didn't waste a second. He dove aside, rolled behind a boulder, and drew his revolver. Barnes was screaming, trying to throw off 80 pounds of enraged muscle. The lynx bit and clawed, turning the guard's face into a mask of blood. "Silver, get away," Caleb yelled. The lynx heard. He leaped off Barnes, making an incredible jump sideways, and vanished into the maze of rocks. Barnes, blinded by blood, opened fire wildly in bursts, chipping the granite. Wagner, hearing the gunfire, took cover behind the plane's fuselage. Barnes, kill that beast, kill them both. Caleb knew that positional warfare meant losing. They had automatics. He had 6 rounds and a knife. He needed to vanish, regroup, and start hunting. He crawled into a fissure, retreating from the lake into the forest. Cat and mouse night fell. The temperature dropped 30 below. Caleb sat in a small cave, bandaging his leg. One bullet had grazed his thigh. The wound wasn't deep, but it bled. Next to him sat Silver. His muzzle was bloody, with someone else's blood. He was licking a paw, stopping occasionally to look at Caleb. In that look, there was something more than animal loyalty. It was understanding. The 2 of us against them, as always. "You saved my hide, brother," Caleb whispered, extending a hand. The lynx allowed him to scratch behind the ear, letting out a short, raspy purr. They became a team. Caleb was the brain. Silver was the sensors. Caleb knew Wagner and Barnes wouldn't move at night. They would wait for dawn by the plane, trying to get the container. But the helicopter was due back tomorrow morning. If they took the cargo and took off, Caleb was a dead man. They would napalm this grid to hide the evidence. "We need to smoke them out," Caleb said. "I have an idea." He began setting traps. He used everything he knew about survival. Sharpened stakes, hidden pits, paracord tripwires. But his main weapon was fear. Dawn came gray and gloomy. Barnes, bandaged up and pumped full of painkillers, sat by a fire clutching his rifle. Wagner was fussing by the open hatch of the plane, pulling out a metal case. "I got it," Wagner shouted. "Call the chopper, Barnes." At that moment, the forest came alive. First, it was a sound. A piercing, terrifying scream, like a woman wailing. It was the lynx screaming. The sound echoed off the cliffs, creating the impression that screams were coming from everywhere. Barnes began to spin, swinging his barrel. "Where are you, you monster?" Then a rock flew, clanging against the plane's metal. Barnes fired into the bush. "Don't shoot, you idiot," Wagner yelled. "You'll puncture the container." Caleb fired. Just once. The bullet hit the fuel tank of the generator they had dragged from the plane for heat. The explosion was small, but it ignited the dry pine needles and the tent canvas. Fire and smoke instantly filled the basin. "Silver, take him," Caleb commanded in a whisper, though the lynx was already acting. The beast didn't attack directly. He ran behind Barnes's back, sweeping his legs out from under him. The mercenary fell into the snow. Before he could rise, Caleb emerged from the smoke and struck his temple with the butt of the revolver. Barnes went limp. Only Wagner remained. He stood by the plane, clutching the case to his chest, aiming a pistol into the smoke. "Show yourself, Rain. I know you're here. You won't get the money, but you can keep your life." Caleb stepped out of the smoke. Silver stood beside him, the fur on his back standing on end, teeth bared. "I don't want your money, Wagner. And you are not leaving here with that death in a box. You think you're a hero?" Wagner laughed, and there was madness in his eyes. "You're a savage. This world belongs to the strong, to those with resources." He aimed the pistol at Silver. "First the cat, then you." But he hadn't accounted for one thing: the ice. Beneath Wagner's feet, warmed by the fire, the lake ice began to crack. A thin web of fractures ran from his boots. Caleb saw it. Silver felt it through the vibration of his paws. "Don't shoot," Caleb said. The shockwave ... Wagner pulled the trigger. The shot rang out like thunder. The bullet grazed Silver's ear, leaving a bloody streak. The lynx hissed. But the main consequence wasn't the shot. The ice under Wagner gave way. With a deafening crack, the ice floe tipped. Wagner vanished under the black, freezing water along with the case. Heavy winter clothes and the metal container dragged him to the bottom instantly. He didn't even have time to scream. Only bubbles of air rose to the surface, and the black water closed again, covering itself with a thin film of new ice. Blood-packed Caleb ran to Silver. The lynx shook his head, drops of blood flying onto the snow. "Let me look, brother." The beast allowed himself to be examined. The bullet had only torn the skin at the tip of the ear. Painful, but not fatal. Caleb took a bandage from his pocket and gently pressed it to the wound. Silver endured it, growling quietly, but staying put. They stood over the ice hole. The lake was silent again. Barnes groaned in the snow, coming to. A long walk in handcuffs awaited him, all the way to the nearest ranger station. In the distance, the sound of a helicopter was heard. But this time, Caleb didn't hide. He took out a flare and fired it into the sky. A red star hung over the dead loop. It was a signal not for Wagner's pilots, who, seeing smoke and no signal from the boss, would likely flee, but for the state police, whom Caleb had called before leaving, using an emergency beacon on a different frequency. He knew they wouldn't make it in time to save him, but now they would pick up the trash. Shadow and Guardian, 6 months passed. Summer in the Ghost River Valley was short, but lush. The slopes were covered in a carpet of wildflowers. Caleb finished repairing the porch. He used part of the reward he received from the government for assistance in preventing the spread of hazardous materials. Wagner was officially declared missing. The case remained at the bottom of the lake, buried under tons of silt. Maybe someday they would retrieve it, but Caleb hoped not. He sat in his rocking chair, watching the sunset. Silver slept on the railing. His damaged ear now had a characteristic notch, giving him an even more roguish appearance. They didn't speak. They didn't need words. People in town thought Caleb was a hermit, a madman who talked to trees. They didn't understand. Loneliness is when you are alone. And Caleb was never alone. He was part of a pack of two. A man who forgot how to be human, and a beast who learned to forgive humans their nature. Silver opened one eye, looked at Caleb, and stretched, extending his claws. Then he hopped off the porch and slowly, majestically walked toward the forest. Before the tree line, he stopped and looked back. "I'm going hunting. Are you with me?" Caleb smiled, grabbed his rifle, and stood up. "I'm with you, brother. Always." The shadows from the trees grew longer, merging the figure of the man and the beast into one, until they disappeared together into the heart of the wild, free north.